Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm very grateful to have been able to secure this debate to discuss the impact of low traffic neighbourhoods in Latchford. And while I go on to talk about the practical and environmental impact of these initiatives, or rather the lack thereof, as I'll explain in the case of Warrington South, I'll be focusing on my constituents' experiences of the Westy Low Traffic Neighbourhood Zone, which was imposed by Warrington Borough Council on people living and working in the Latchford area of my constituency earlier this year. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is an issue myself and Conservative councillors have been at odds with Labour over for some time now. I've had many meetings with local residents and business owners who've told me they are angry and quite simply fed up with the low traffic zone that's been forced on them without proper consultation, and that the council have failed to listen to their concerns over the scheme. Now, in explaining the background of what's been happening in Latchford, I'll take everyone back to 2019, pre-pandemic, when initial consultations took place into a low traffic neighbourhood. And as part of the Central 6 Streets Master Plan for Warrington, the Borough Council have proposed to implement low traffic neighbourhood zones in Westy, an area of Latchford, and Orford, which falls into the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Warrington North. From late 2019, nothing happened for almost 3 years, and then, out of the blue, signs began to appear. The trial for these low traffic neighbourhoods was due to begin on the 20th of June 2022 and to last for 18 months. And prior to the scheme's implementation, I'd already received many pieces of correspondence from constituents who were concerned how the LTN would impact traffic routes and congestion, especially by diverting vehicles around 2 primary schools and through nearby streets. Now, when I look back and closely at the Central 6 Master Plan, it was obvious to see why many constituents were concerned by the lack of communication from the council. Even the dedicated Central 6 Facebook page was last updated in 2019, which I think, given in this day and age where social media is so critical for getting a message out to constituents, the severe lack of information from the council really is quite shocking. Conservative councillors and myself called for planned closures to be put on hold so that concerns about the LTN could be properly addressed before any trial run was enacted. The Conservative group on the council tabled a motion calling for operations to be halted in case the Borough Council refused to listen and decided to press ahead anyway. Now, it was really encouraging to see so many local residents actually taking to the streets and making their voices heard at a well-attended process outside the council offices when the vote was due to take place. There were many people who got in contact with me and borough councillors warning of the inevitable problems the LTN scheme would cause and urging for the council to rethink. Sadly, it came as no surprise. Labour and Liberal Democrat councillors decided to press ahead with the Westy scheme, despite their decision to pause an equivalent scheme in Orford in Warrington North. Now, in an open letter to Warrington residents, the council leader wrote, "After carefully considering feedback we've received over the last couple of weeks, we've come to the conclusion that whilst we will proceed as planned with Westy, it is right to pause the scheme in Orford and reflect on the feedback we've received." Now, I don't know exactly why the council considered my constituents in Warrington South to be less deserving of proper consultation over policies impacting on their daily lives than those living in Warrington North. But there we have it. The council pressed ahead in Warrington South, but paused in Warrington North. The day before the Westy trial was due to begin, Conservative councillors again placed a motion before the full council calling on the LTN to be paused for further consultation with local residents. But again, it was simply ignored. And a few days after the LTN trial had begun, I met with business owners at their request to hear their takes on the road closures and how it was impacting on their businesses. And I have to say, I have never been so depressed and seriously worried as a result of changes that were made by a local council in impacting businesses in those areas. Some had suffered a drop in trade so significant that they were seriously already considering closing the business down. 2 businesses I spoke to had seen takings drop by 40% on the previous week, and after 5 months, I'm afraid the situation is no better. There are local businesses, the people who proudly stand as the backbone of our high streets, who rely on passing trade for much of their income, telling me that they are now faced with closure and redundancies unless the problems with the LTNs are addressed urgently. Over the summer, I sent out thousands of surveys to every household in Latchford East asking for feedback on the low traffic neighbourhood so I could understand and get feedback on a general opinion once the scheme was brought into effect. I'm incredibly grateful that over 900 households came back to me to share their thoughts, and the results speak for themselves. Since the implementation of the new road layout several months prior, 86% of respondents told me they wanted to return to the old layout, whilst 87% said they did not support the decision to close Grange Avenue to through traffic. The most alarming result was that over 85% of respondents reported that their journey times had increased because they were sitting in traffic for longer as a result of a low traffic neighbourhood. And as someone who's experienced travelling along Kingsway and Latchford Road in peak times through Warrington South, I understand their frustration. Increased congestion clearly flies in the face of the council's own environmental commitments. Yet the reality of an LTN scheme has made it simply worse. What I really do think is a travesty for local democracy, though, is that 85% of those constituents that fed back to me said they weren't consulted about the road closures prior to them being implemented. And I'm afraid, Mr Deputy Speaker, it is simply unacceptable to put in place a scheme which is going to cause so much change and disruption to people's daily lives and then not have the courtesy to ask for their views on it beforehand. After I shared these findings with the Borough Council and an evaluation of the feedback from their own interim survey had been carried out, I received an email from the council saying that they were going to make some changes to the Westy Low Traffic Neighbourhood, and I was hoping they would really take account of the points raised by local residents. Sadly, they didn't. They didn't reverse any of the scheme, they simply moved a couple of planters. It's meant that constituents who've experienced 10, sometimes 20-minute longer journeys to get from one end of a road to another are still facing those long delays. What local residents in Latchford made clear to me is they want Grange Avenue reopened to traffic. This is a simple change that will reduce congestion and reduce journey times. But yet again, the council are failing to listen. Now, what I hope I've made abundantly clear is that opposition to low traffic neighbourhoods is not about blanket opposition to policies designed to protect the environment and improve air quality. The problem we have in Warrington is that when car options are taken away, there aren't many alternatives. The overwhelming majority of workplaces in Warrington are on the edge of town, quite some distance from homes, and the opportunity to use public transport is limited, even though the government have provided additional funding for buses. Replication of a London-style service just isn't there yet. And what I see in so many of the surveys that have taken place into low traffic neighbourhoods is that in areas in London where there is good public transport, these schemes seem to work very well. In areas around the UK where there is no alternative, they struggle to get traction.
Would my right honourable friend give way?
I'm more than happy to give way.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for his generosity. Just on your points about buses, the honourable friend's points on buses, one of the challenges I often find is about the consultation with bus users about changes of bus routes. Recently, I've met with a community of bus users, and the challenges they've found with bus routes that have been changed, but they haven't been consulted on the buses that they travel on about what those changes will be. Now, I'm sure there were consultations, but I think there needs to be a more robust guidelines from government and local government and for the bus organisations themselves to say this route is changing. What do you think about that? How will it change your life, and what will be the impact of that? And I think that would make it go a long way to helping reassure people that they're not going to suddenly find themselves without transport to hospitals, to work, and in their daily lives.
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, and I know he is a fantastic champion for people living in Watford, and Watford, a very similar town to Warrington, that relies on public transport, particularly for older residents. And he is absolutely right that where changes are made, so often bus companies think their message is being delivered to the users, and it simply isn't. And I think, you know, we should encourage everybody involved with delivering public transport solutions to deliver a message time and time again, so that that message really gets through to the constituents that need it. Very happy to do that.
Briefly on that point, I think what's quite interesting here is the idea that these decisions are being taken in isolation, and that actually no one's considering the kind of integrated transport aspects of this. You close a road, it has a knock-on impact on residents in one way. You change a bus service, it has an impact on the other. Do you think that we empower councils to actually do a good job, or do you think that they are just working in isolation to their own specific individual goals?
I'm very grateful for the honourable member's intervention. I think actually this is the whole point of this debate. The decision taken by locally elected members to make changes to a road layout, to make changes to bus timetables, has a huge impact on the lives of people. And it is so easy to forget that one small decision taken in a town hall at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening can really, really impact on the ability of somebody to get to work on time, even to get to work. You know, these things are absolutely fundamental to the lives that people lead, yet we take decisions without really thinking through the big picture and how those things play out when you look at them as a whole. Absolutely agree with the with my honourable friend's intervention there. I'm going to come back to the point in Warrington in particular. Warrington's road network really struggles to cope with traffic because of the funnelling effect of the bridges over the River Mersey and the Manchester Ship Canal. And anybody that knows the Westy area of Warrington will know that it is surrounded by water to the north and to the south with the Mersey and the Ship Canal. And it's been that way for as long as anybody can remember. And as I've explained, this low traffic neighbourhood scheme simply won't fulfil its stated objectives. In fact, it makes the air pollution far worse because traffic sits for much longer because it is not flowing in the way that it was, and journey times are taking longer. And the council have really failed to take into account the proper environmental and logistical impacts of their plans. And that, I'm afraid, is simply bewildering to me and the many residents that have been in touch to talk about this issue. On top of that, it's the entire manner in which this low traffic neighbourhood scheme has been imposed without proper consultation or due consideration for local people, which angers both them and myself. And when you close off roads which residents and businesses depend on for their throughfare and for trade for so many years, it doesn't take a genius to work out that it's going to have negative impacts in other areas. There is no hindsight required here for Labour. This is simply a case of the council putting through a scheme which hasn't received proper consideration or has a necessary consultation, and it needs to be reversed. My right honourable friend, the Leader of the House, put so well in her response to my question a few weeks ago, councillors should take note of what local people are saying, not just because it's their job as representatives, but because local people will more often not have the best ideas about how to manage a particular situation that affects them through their own lived experiences. Before I close, I have one or two questions that I'd like to put to my honourable friend, the Minister, and I'd be very grateful if he could give me some responses either now or if he could write to me in the future. My constituents are very keen to understand when funding is allocated to schemes like the one in Westy, what assessment is actually made by the government, his department, to understand the value that is gained from that funding? And how does the Department for Transport monitor the benefits in terms of environment and air quality in an area where a low traffic neighbourhood is introduced. Warrington historically has some of the worst air pollution levels of any town in the north of England because of the motorway network that surrounds the town, with the M6, M62 and M56 all very close by. But can we actually see that introducing a low traffic neighbourhood will make a difference to the air quality in those areas if we're not putting any additional equipment in place to monitor what's actually happening in those areas? If the Minister could tell me when councils make bids for active travel funding, how does the government ensure that there is some level of joined-up thinking, as my honourable friend, the member for South Ribble, mentioned there, so that where motorists are penalised and unable to drive on certain roads, there are suitable alternatives provided for them so that they can still get to work? And are there any penalties for local authorities who apply for trial funding but who later realise that having ran a trial, it didn't work? And what level of local engagement and critically support should schemes have before they're introduced into a local area? If a local authority does carry out a survey pre-introducing a low traffic neighbourhood and sees that actually people don't support it, is that justification for them not actually going ahead with the scheme? Or should they push ahead anyway because it will be good for local people? Finally, can the Minister confirm that the scheme in Westy was put forward by local councillors for central government funding and not the other way round? I think I've been clear in my opposition to the Westy Low Traffic Neighbourhood scheme, and I oppose it because my local constituents tell me it's making their lives more difficult. And as long as my constituents continue to be affected by ill-thought-out decisions by the Labour Borough Council, I'll continue to hold the Council to account in this place and in Warrington.
Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Warrington South, for securing this adjournment debate today. And also, I'd just like to also thank the honourable members for South Ribble and for Watford, both local champions in their communities, for raising further important points. And I'll just come on to address one of the main questions the honourable gentleman asked right at the very start. And that is that this scheme in Westy was put forward by local councillors to the government for funding on these specific questions around monitoring, the nature of funding and how the ratios and things like that are allocated. I will write to him with a detailed explanation about that from my departmental officials. If I could start, Mr Deputy Speaker, by setting out some background on where responsibilities for traffic management issues like this lie. Managing traffic on local roads is and always has been a matter for local transport authorities. They have a range of duties, powers and responsibilities, and a considerable toolkit of measures that they can make use of. Local highway authorities have a duty under Section 16 of the Traffic Management Act 2004 to manage their roads to secure, quotes, expeditious movement of all traffic. Meeting this duty is by no means easy and is a daily challenge faced by local authority traffic managers and their colleagues across the country. Balancing the different needs of road users and the many and varied demands on a road is complex, and the role of the department, therefore, is to set an overarching government policy and provide an enabling framework of legislation, guidance and advice. However, the department has no remit to intervene in matters of local democratic decision-making. Decisions on what traffic management measures to provide, including low traffic neighbourhoods like the one my honourable friend has been talking about in Latchford and specifically in Westy, are entirely a matter for local authorities like Warrington to make, and they need to be held accountable for them by the local electorate. Streets and roads make up 3/4 of all of our public space, and the way they are designed has, as my honourable friend has been outlining in his specific case, a really significant impact on people's lives. The department has for a long time encouraged local authorities to design their streets in a way that creates a sense of place and puts consideration of the needs of local people first. The Manual for Streets, published by the Department of Transport in 2007, provides guidance on this. designing streets in a way that can deliver a wide range of objectives, for example, high street regeneration and economic growth, contribute towards net zero, decarbonising transport and indeed air pollution, as my honourable friend has been talking about. And we are currently revising the manual for streets and aim to publish a revised version in early 2023. There are very many good and popular traffic management schemes across the country, many of them designed to enable local economic growth. Examples include the waterfront in Ipswich and the centre of Welwyn Garden City. However, there are others which do not seem to have met up to those high standards. The challenge now is to learn from experience and to make sure that all local authorities develop schemes in a way that fully involves their communities and leads to high-quality outcomes. Only in this way will we see the step change in design that we need to help deliver the commitments from both gear change and the goal overall of net zero. And my honourable friend has rightly raised his concerns with engagement with the local council in the planning stages and later. But engagement shouldn't just end there, and this is an important point, Mr Deputy Speaker. Engagement needs to continue, and authorities should continue to monitor how schemes are performing and make changes if they need to. With regards to Latchford, I agree that any scheme must be developed and implemented after thorough engagement with the community affected. The Department has made this very clear in communicating with local authorities about the Active Travel Fund. Community engagement is key, and while I note that Warrington did carry out some engagement on their proposal, engagement should use objective methods to establish a truly representative picture of local views and to ensure that minority views do not dominate. It should also have no bearing on the party political nature of local members of Parliament. There are many ways an authority can consult and engage, and what is important is that representatives of the whole community are engaged in it. It is for the local authority, obviously, to decide what methods to use, but obviously, as my right honourable friend has been doing today, they should be held to account for whatever methods they do use. Authorities should also be opening to continue to listen and make changes to any scheme in the light of the real-world experience and feedback from local people. As to the impact on journey times in and around Latchford, it is for Warrington Borough Council and their leadership to justify the design of this particular scheme. Moreover, I understand that changes to road layouts can cause confusion. Again, while the exact nature of this scheme is a matter for the Council, the aim of low traffic neighbourhoods generally is to prevent through traffic and rat running, not to prevent access by cars for residents, visitors or essential services. And where they are put in place, this should be kept in mind. I note the concerns raised about whether low traffic neighbourhoods lead to increased congestion on their boundary roads particularly, and it is certainly the case that where a low traffic neighbourhood is poorly designed, it can have negative impacts. But well-designed active travel schemes need not cause additional congestion, and when part of a well-designed network can actually be a far more efficient way of helping move people around our town centres and indeed in and out of towns. I will be waiting on the phone.
I'm very grateful for the response he is giving. Does he agree with me that certain areas are just simply not right for a low traffic neighbourhood because of the constraints that exist there, rivers, other waterways, and to close rat runs, as the Minister mentioned, actually they're closing roads that people use, and the speed at which vehicles travel along those roads is a matter for perhaps looking at road calming rather than determining that they are rat runs.
I completely agree with my honourable friend that this is very much a horses for courses situation. Some areas these are suitable for. My honourable friend mentioned that in some parts of the country these have been welcomed. In other areas they are not suitable. So he's completely right to highlight that point. But as I was saying, well-designed schemes can help as part of more efficiently moving people around. This is again where Active Travel England can help local authorities to ensure that their schemes are properly thought through, including on the impact on other traffic in and around their areas. To conclude, Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this important issue. In short, well-designed schemes can promote better road use, including cycling and walking, and deliver benefits actually for all road users and local communities. They can make our town centres more attractive and can boost local economies, as well as delivering health and environmental benefits. And our updated manual for streets, together with the work of Active Travel England, we have a role in helping local authorities to effectively design and implement such schemes, and also learning the lessons of experience in implementation from existing schemes. But what's particularly important is that local authorities should listen to their local people and must reflect carefully the views expressed by the residents that they serve and also their democratically elected representatives, such as the people in Warrington South, who could have no more a doubter champion than my honourable friend. I hope that that in this case the Warrington Council listening to those representations and will consider them as they take this scheme forwards into the future.